We are truly here. Every moment up until this point has led us to this, the finale of the 1,000-year blood war. We've witnessed glorious fights, valiant deaths, and we've learned the truth about the origins of our very own Ichigo Kurosaki. The end of this story may just be one of the best executions of thematic elements we've seen by Kubo, and despite the controversy regarding pacing, I still walked away from this finale with a smile on my face and an endearing love for this story. If you're new to this series, we cover Bleach from a completely blind perspective of never having read the manga or seen the anime. Since starting this journey, I've fallen in love with this dark story and the relatability Ichigo possesses as a protagonist. This story truly came at the perfect time in my life and changed my life for the better. And with concluding this series, it may just be my favorite story of all time. So if you haven't already, please drop a subscription and sit back and relax because this is my blind review of Bleach. After the conclusion of our Quincy on Quincy battle, we learned that not just Bosby was defeated, but Lolato and Giselle, which I'm sure we all saw coming, but what continually surprises me is the gore within this arc, which is on full display within their defeats. This arc has been so gruesome and vividly drawn, and I really hope that whatever studio chooses to animate Bleach, that they don't censor the gore from this arc because it really fits the brutality of this war and Kubo as a whole. After we see the bloodied body of the Quincy and Yuha preparing for a nap, we're then brought to Ichigo and the gang all wondering where Grimmjow disappeared to. Grimmjow, in relentless pursuit of Askin, eventually finds him pouring tea, and Askin, obviously distraught from the interruption of tea time, he flees only for the pursuit to continue. However, the pursuit wasn't long. With a tiny gift ball thrown at Grimmjow, he's completely incapacitated, and Askin uses his notorious line of fatal and even references Grimmjow's mother. Incredible. Every moment Askin is on screen I thoroughly enjoy, and he stands as one of the most meta characters in this story. This glimpse of greatness we see of him sets anticipation for him to shine later on after we get through a few more fights. The sequence of this arc follows a schematic nature of going through these individual fights of the Schutzstaffel, which outside of Askin, all have parallel fights that result with grotesque and large transformations. For several of these fights, they went on for 9 or 10 chapters, and I wish the timeline could have allowed for Kubo to enable that to be more uniform for all fights, because Urahara's was much shorter than I wanted, but due to the rush to finish the story, unfortunately there's some detail left out in a few fights that I would have gladly wished to have been extended, and it results in some of the fights being shorter than others. If Bleach went on for another 50 to 60 chapters, I would have been more than fine with it, and I imagine all of us would delight in any further Bleach content. But I have high expectations that when the anime comes out, these fights can have even more detail and backstory roped in with them. Speaking of fights, the first fight we see begins with our favorite cop duo of Kenpachi and Mayuri, who encounter a peculiar robed individual within Pernita. Mayuri and Kenpachi had such great chemistry, and with Mayuri continually being a smartass to Kenpachi, it made me smile throughout all of their interactions. Nemu, Ikkaku, and Madarame even expressed their concerns on their sporadic captains, and an important piece of dialogue exists within Ikkaku expressing that Nemu giving an opinion is a rarity. These changes within Nemu that are exemplified through this fight express the increased free will within her, and subsequently her perfection we'll get to later on. Kenpachi not being one to reason or listen, he charges straight into battle to slice down Pernita, only to have his arm mangled and twisted, resulting in Kenpachi cutting off his own arm to avoid his entire body dying. There's something about Kubo and cutting off arms, because the amount of limbs taken off this arc is quite absurd, and we're just beginning the armpocalypse. In order to save Kenpachi from killing himself by fighting against Pernita, Mayuri paralyzes his nerves, which serves to validate Mayuri's hypothesis that Pernita's ability is to sink nerves into the enemy body and forcefully control their movements. A perfect matchup for a crazy scientist if I do say so myself. What's so scary about Mayuri is his ability as a scientist to constantly study and evolve through his fights, to win not by pure Reiatsu, but by his intelligence and evolution. Mayuri, who was responsible for wiping out a large number of Quincy in the human world, he studied them, and as a result, he's been preparing tirelessly since the first invasion on how their abilities work and how to subsequently counter them. Despite his wacky appearance and demeanor, he is one of the most prepared captains of the Gotei 13. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Mayuri in this fight comes across as a villain despite being a captain. He delights in the combat and experimenting with his foes. In this case, Pernita is a science experiment to him, and there are few fights in Bleach that was as fun as this one. We're eventually brought to Pernita's true identity, that being the left arm of the Spirit King, which Mayuri knew immediately. The Reiatsu matched what he collected from Ukitake, and he had suspicions regarding the left arm's location, which again further expresses the genius of his character. Mayuri isn't going to be blindsided by anything. I had some questions as to why the left arm served Yuha, who aimed to usurp the Spirit King, yet the right arm aimed to protect Soul Society and stop Yuha. The differing interests of the arms and their motivations I found compelling, but unfortunately it's not fleshed out too much. Whilst Pernita shoots out his nerves, a scene I found hilarious was Mayuri pulling out an umbrella to shield him from the influx of nerves, and the umbrella screaming out in pain. Moments like this make this fight incredible. It's the comedic nuances and the thrill of battle which set this fight apart. Through this battle, Pernita continually evolves in sentience and speech, and this theme of evolution from Pernita mirrors in a more apparent way the evolution of our lovely Nemu, as we'll soon learn. Another moment that amazed me throughout this battle was Mayuri fighting with the Quincy technique Hiranyaku, and I swear he proves the point that science trumps all logic. Pernita, despite seeming to be taken out, we quickly learn regenerates and multiplies when cut, resulting in one of the nerve attacks reaching Mayuri, only for us to be shown that Mayuri altered the configuration of his own blood vessels and muscles, making Pernita's attempt ineffective. Quite a Frankenstein-esque moment, but only upon reading back through this fight can I see the foreshadowing that he likely learned this scientific self-modulation from his former captain. Despite endless research into the arms of the Spirit King, Mayuri emphasizes that knowledge gained from books is simply knowledge and nothing more, that he won't truly believe something until he obtains proof with his very own hands. This battle is a stark example of the true nature of a scientist that Mayuri personifies. There are very few characters who exemplify these characteristics so perfectly. The delight in the unknown, the desire to experience something himself, and reaching a conclusion through experimentation. I probably sound like a broken record, but this is truly a magnificent battle. The Bankai of Mayuri finally takes place, and much like other Bankais we see this arc, elements of it have changed. This new Bankai within Matai, Fuku, and Shutai is a modified form of his previous Bankai, and it looks absolutely grotesque. The role of this new modified Bankai is to give birth to a new Ashisho Jiozu, and it disgustingly births a new fetus-like creature with its nerves on the surface that are divided into 70,000 layers, making it a direct counter to Pernita's ability in manipulating the nerves, and this baby proceeds to eat Pernita. Truly a disgusting scene. Despite this, Pernita manages to survive and almost hits Mayuri with a Quincy arrow, only for Mayuri to be saved by Nemu, who quickly loses an arm. Shout out Kubo. Nemu and Mayuri then have a conversation with Mayuri clearly upset that Nemu interfered, that he didn't teach her to act this way, which Nemu agrees, implying she acted of her own volition. Mayuri responds to this with care for Nemu in his own clouded way of speaking, saying they fought countless battles and it would trouble him greatly to raise another Nemu, but he quickly cuts back to his usual character of ordering her around like an experiment. This fight progresses fast with Mayuri and Nemu working together, and Pernita's ability for evolution is demonstrated by mirroring the very Bankai and Mayuri that we just witnessed. It seems Pernita's abilities evolve through experiences through its nerves, and is really such a fearsome and horrific opponent to face. However, in this moment Mayuri isn't concerned for his own life, but Nemu's. We then see Nemu's flashback, that she was Nemuri number 7, that it took 7 attempts to create Nemu into what she is now from an artificial soul. Mayuri created life from an artificial soul, allowing him to no longer be in the shadow of Kisuke Urahara's brilliance. Mayuri didn't refer to her as number 7 because I truly believe he viewed her as his own child. She was his dream actualized. An artificial Shinigami with a soul created from nothing, with everything she'd do, learning to walk, to speaking. Every evolution that she displayed Mayuri took pride in. All the small dialogues that take place throughout this fight emphasize the evolution of Nemu, her continual progression towards free will, towards true humanity. Mayuri loves Nemu and he cares for her deeply, even though he has an odd way of expressing it. She's his progeny. As flashbacks unfortunately tend to do, they precede deaths, and Nemu protects Mayuri and she's split apart by Pernita's ability. This is the sole time we've ever seen Mayuri feel true despair and solemn. The emotional state he's in evokes a figment of his imagination speaking to him within Szayelaporro, and Szayelaporro prods at him and reminds him of his own speech of perfection, informing him of the irony in believing Nemu was perfect. This conversation and callback to Szayelaporro wakes up Mayuri mentally, and he takes Nemu's brain from the pile of mush and allows Pernita to eat Nemu's remains. An extremely gruesome and disgusting scene, but within her remains exists a forced acceleration cellular breakdown organ, and it causes Pernita's self-destruction. A fitting way for Pernita to die due to it dying to its own ability within replication, but it comes at a great cost to our heroes. Mayuri loses his child within Nemu, his version of perfection, but given he has her brain, I have hopes for her eventual return. With the fight concluding, 2 containers are revealed within Rangiku, and Toshiro now recovered from their previous zombification, and Mayuri is carried by Ikkaku to the container to heal alongside with Zaraki, and Zaraki's men thank Mayuri for keeping their captain safe. Mayuri, despite all his antics, earned the trust and debt from Squad 11, which is quite a difficult thing to do. The progression of Mayuri from when he was initially presented within this story to who he's developed into now, particularly within the 1000-Year Blood War, contains such a vastly stark difference. Mayuri grew into a character I loved and admired through watching him fight and seeing some of his backstory, his humanity, his love for Nemu. It made him all the more fantastic of a character. With the conclusion of the brilliant fight, we're thrown immediately to a shootout. From the rooftop, Lily is sniping some of our Shinigami like he's playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, camping in wastelands with an intervention. None other than our Captain Commander Shunzui, he steps up to eliminate our Quincy camper, and we see Shunzui, or should I say an apparition of Shunzui, shot by Lil, and the real Shunzui pops up behind him, playful as always. Shunzui, who is usually a relaxed and cheerful individual, in this fight we get to see the true nature of Shunzui when push comes to shove, and reading these chapters was breathtaking. The battle begins with a game of Daruma-san fell over, which in the States is called red light, green light. Lil, being one of the most prepared Quincy's, he informs Shunzui that he studied every fight he's been in, and he knows the nature of his Shikai, but there's an endless amount of children's game which Shunzui still has in his pocket. And the explanation of the game, the nature of Daruma-san fell over, is that if Shunzui is seen moving, he loses. And based upon Shunzui explaining this game, and that something is only truly a game if others know the rules, it leads me to believe for his games to be effective, the rules need to be stated, which is convenient for us as a reader, because Shunzui's games are not things I always immediately know the rules to from my childhood. Despite Lil's confidence in seeing Shunzui, Shunzui explains that who he shot earlier wasn't an illusion, but rather it was himself. It was his Ryetsu that he consolidated and left out there. That during battle, people with Ryetsu use their vision and sense of Ryetsu to see, and through battle people tend to rely more on their Rikaku, which ultimately is one of the downfalls of Lil when fighting against a trickster like Shunzui. In a scene that I can't wait to be animated, Lil scoffs at the notion, but Shunzui gets deathly serious and informs Lil that he is the Captain Commander of the Gote 13. And my god, in this moment, it truly felt like he was stepping out of Yamamoto's shadow and into his own leadership. This notion is mirrored even further with Shinji telling Momo that Kiraku will be fine by himself. To imagine if it was Yamamoto being left behind there. They have nothing to worry about. To take responsibilities for the lives of his soldiers is the duty of the Captain Commander. The dichotomy of Shunzui's playful and dark side is focused on heavily throughout this fight, and it's mirrored with his Shikai and Bankai that we'll soon get to. Lil and Shunzui fight against each other, with Shunzui using incredibly deceptive abilities, and eventually the other nature of Lil's shrift is explained. With an X-axis, there are two sides that are inverse to each other. The axis we've seen thus far allows him to pierce through anything and everything, and the inverse of his ability is that nothing can pierce through him. Quite a powerful ability both offensively and defensively, due to Shunzui no longer being able to stab him normally. In fact, these abilities seem to be the power of a god, which is a concept that both Lil and Gerard emulate. With this, Lil's Volston dig takes place, and it's frankly terrifying. In a cocoon-esque shell with wings on all sides, he pushes Kiraku to the brink and exhausts him of all options after he sustains a ton of damage. This evokes the Bankai of Shunzui, and the build-up and paneling for this moment was god tier. This slow progression into one of the most anticipated Bankais lived up to all the hype, and it was set up perfectly. With both his swords dug into the ground and Shunzui's back literally against the wall, we see Katen Kirikotsu Kuramatsu Shinju. Upon the use of this Bankai, the entire Varvelt grows cold and dark. His power is inescapable with a huge area of effect, and it makes sense why it wasn't used versus Stark or Aizen. His Bankai is such a contrast to his Shikai, and is reflective of the true nature and burden of Shunzui. His outward appearance is relaxed and childlike, but his internal state is dark and heavy. His Bankai is one of the most obscure Bankai in comparison to others we see, but it acts as a theatrical play with 4 parts with 2 lovers and a suicide pact. It casts Kiraku as the woman and Lil the man. Act 1 shares all the wounds, and from my understanding, the dark twisted play revolves around a lover who beat his significant other, and now the wounds are shared, and within Act 2, the man being Lil in this play feels deep regret for harming his lover, and he's stricken with the plague. Act 3 plunges them into cold water, which it seems the 2 lovers vowed to commit suicide together within, and it seems inescapable. In Act 3, the shadowed figure we see within the initial display of the Bankai is revealed, that being Ohana, and she's a beautiful Zanpakuto spirit with an eye patch just like Shunzui, and their dynamic is intimate. Through their interactions, I truthfully felt Shunzui had feelings for his Bankai, but I could very well be mistaking his flirty personality with truly having feelings for Ohana. Their story, like the very act they're currently experiencing in battle, is tragic. The words of Ohana within being his companion choking back her own desires, sworn to be by Kiraku's side until the end. They come across as lovers bound together, which fits the tragic nature of the Bankai's ability. The grand finale takes place, Act 4 slits the throat of Lil, making for the end of a tragic tale. Shunzui's Bankai seems to be a reflection of his true feelings, his romanticism and the tragedy he carries within his heart. For a conclusion of a play, it felt complete, but Lil believes himself to be a god, and he activates the second form of his Volstan dig, and I truthfully had death flags at this moment. With Lil escaping the play, he appears quite like Arceus, who also happens to be a god, and Lil descends into madness of grandeur. For an individual who serves loyally under Yuha, it's thematically perfect for the Schutzstaffel to be emissaries or angels of God. With the wrath of God on full display, Lil is terrifying and his own humanity seems to be dwindling as his speech reflects purely what you'd imagine a crazed god-like being to speak as. All options at this moment felt hopeless for our dear Shunzui, and even his Zanpakuto spirit tells him to rest, but Nanao wakes him up begging Shunzui to give her Zanpakuto, to forget the promise to her mother. My interest was immediately piqued because I love backstories, and the anticipation was even more paramount with Kubo baiting us a bit by saying to Nanao, your Zanpakuto Kyokotsu. And based on the paneling, I felt it was implied that Kyokotsu was her Zanpakuto, but rather Kyokotsu was hiding her true sword. The flashback that ensues is heartbreaking. The Issei clan, as we soon learn, is matrilineal, and every man brought into the family dies due to a curse. Nanao's mother wanted to end this curse, and she left her clan by marrying Kyoku's brother. Nanao's mother, who Kyoku was extremely close to, she asked Kyoku to hide her family sword because it carried this very curse she sought to get rid of, and she wanted to make sure her unborn daughter wouldn't be subjected to this curse or this path that her clan faces. Despite these actions of altruism, she is sentenced to execution due to her losing a sacred treasure, and shortly after he loses Nanao's mother, Kyoku also has to watch his older brother die from the very curse his wife sought to protect him from. The tragedy of Kyoku having to keep the secret to his brother that he was inadvertently responsible for his wife's death, it must have broke Kyoku as he now carries the weight of both his sister-in-law and brother's death on his shoulder. Shunzui's relaxed and childish demeanor is a tragic facade. His frequent drinking isn't just part of his character, it's his way of dealing with the darkness he carries. His Shikai reflects his outward side, and his Bankai his true internal state of being. His two hairpins from both his brother and sister-in-law are continual reminders of the two he lost and carries them with him every day. In this backstory, we also see how Nanao was accepted to the Gote 13 in Shunzui's division, and that he's always tried to protect her. She expected to go to the Kido Corps because she doesn't have a Zanpakuto, but Shunzui brought her to his division so he could always be close to her. This backstory was phenomenal, and what ensues with Nanao now choosing to scoff in the face of such curse, she wields her family's Shinkin Hakoken, which reflects the power of a god right back to the god itself. Nanao, with no training in swordsmanship, is ineffective in using a blade, and in a beautiful sequence of panels, Shunzui stands behind her, helping her use the sword effectively to finally defeat Lil Baro. This moment was a beautiful expression of the depth of the relationship of Nanao and Shunzui, captain and lieutenant, and I couldn't have asked for a better fight. Lil Baro is defeated by Shunzui and Nanao, but now down below in Serite he's finished off by a dead man, that being Lieutenant Kira, and I was genuinely shocked when reading this. I thought he was absolutely dead, but in this case of war and protecting their very own world, even dead men will rise to take up arms. In the midst of all this battle, we're left with two remaining of the Schutzstaffel, and we're presented with Gerard Valkyrie being torn apart by Shinji and Byakuya's group. Despite Gerard seeming to be dead, Byakuya continues to attack his dead body to ensure the success of their mission. In this battle, there are no punches pulled. We unfortunately then learn Gerard's Shrift, the miracle. His power is to exchange anything damaged and replace it with the size of a god. Gerard reminds me a ton of Yami Espada No. 0 due to the vast increase in size, but rather being fueled by anger like Yami, instead he's fueled by the damage he's taken, which is an even more strong ability. With Gerard's power, I feel Kubo wrote him a bit too strong, which is why later on he has to deal with Gerard in a very unique way, but just as we're presented with Gerard's overwhelming power, it quickly cuts to the focus of Askin. Askin serves as the most meta character in the story who comes across as knowing he's within a manga, and he gives the backstory on Pernita and Gerard, going so far as to say that the rumor is that Gerard is the Spirit King's heart. Again, I have more questions about the Spirit King. This moment also informs not just us, but surprisingly Ichigo, who's incapacitated due to the gift ball, along with Chad and Orihime. As it seems, this isn't their fight. Yoruichi arrives and tells Ichigo and the rest to go complete their true objective, and I damn near jumped out of my seat with anticipation for her fighting once more within the story. Askin, Yoruichi, and Urahara are all in one fight spanning a good chunk of chapters. These were seriously some of my favorite chapters of this arc. Askin, with his focus on fighting in style and delicacy, and made him such a unique Schutzstaffel, and made him so memorable and relatable compared to the other members of the Schutzstaffel. All the members outside of Askin mirror the aura and self-belief of a god, but Askin just feels like a dude. Yoruichi, when she releases her Raijin Senkai, she looked absolutely incredible, and it seems Kubo really enjoyed showing off Yoruichi in tight clothing, because he had a ton of people focusing more on how amazing she looked rather than the fight at times. Yushiro takes part in this fight as well, and he surprisingly is incredibly strong despite his very childlike demeanor. However, Askin isn't taken down very easily. With him absorbing so much Rietsu, he now upped his lethal dose of it, making him impermeable to its damage. With Askin now seemingly invincible and throwing around the punchline of "that's fatal," Kubo utilizes a writing element to build anticipation for further fights, and also juxtaposes all these events happening simultaneously to make the fights not come across as one-off fights throughout Varvelt. He shows us the Visored versus Gerard, who I imagined would be a direct counter to Quincy due to their hollow powers, and Hitsugaya even joins the fray. Kubo also brings us to Uryu, who we haven't seen in quite a while, and we're shown a flashback of a conversation of Ichigo and Uryu in discussion of future careers. Uryu, once wanting to be a doctor, he quickly switched this desire after witnessing his father cut apart his mother's dead body. This important flashback moment foreshadows what we'll see later in the conclusion, and it was far more paramount than I realized at the time. With Hashwalth and Uryu now confronting each other, Hashwalth begins to antagonize Uryu regarding some of the questionable things he's done, hinting at the treachery he intends to enact, and Ichigo arrives to the scene in convenient timing. Uryu is now instructed to kill Ichigo to prove his loyalty. Uryu and Ichigo slightly battle momentarily before Uryu finally reveals his true intentions, to remain at Varvelt and crash it into the ground, sacrificing himself and saving his friends. I never expected Uryu to be a true traitor, but still seeing this revelation, it made me happy to see that Uryu is still on our side. This scene results in Ichigo going on to pursue Yuha, and Uryu remaining there to fight Hashwalth as his plan was foiled due to the omniscience that Hashwalth possesses while Yuha sleeps. This was a ton of action that sets up the rest of the fights after the conclusion of Askin, and oh boy, this Askin fight is something else. When Askin arrives back to the story, he's always on screen talking to himself, and at this moment he's lamenting that death is so far away from him, and we see Yoruichi incapacitated and in danger. I was momentarily fearful for Yoruichi, but I knew where this was going. The arrival of Kisuke Urahara takes place, and he may have been my most anticipated fight of the 1,000-Year Blood War, and with his arrival in very Urahara-like fashion, he's relaxed and pervy as ever. Kisuke and Askin are both really similarly natured characters with their always calm and relaxed demeanor, so their matchup is beyond perfect. Askin tells Urahara that he's one of the 5 threads deemed by Yuha, and I had chills at this revelation. The 5 were Ichigo for his Latin abilities, Zaraki for his combat prowess, Ichibei for his wisdom, Aizen for his Rietsu, and Urahara for his resourcefulness. No matter what Urahara faces, he always has a plan and a way to win. This is a testament to the genius nature of Urahara. He may come across as a bozo at times due to his silly appearance, but he's quite the contrary. He's the smartest individual within our story. Urahara quickly disables Askin's death dealing within Yoruichi, and he activates her form Shunku Raiju Senkei, which coats her in lightning and has her acting like a cat, which is a callback to her original form we met her in. Urahara was able to do this due to understanding the nature of Askin's ability and the science of changing one slight part within her spirit energy, thus changing her entire spiritual makeup, making Askin unable to adapt to the new changes. Yoruichi fought so beautifully, and I loved the design with the aura around her. She was beyond powerful. When all seemed lost for Askin and Yoruichi having a victorious catnap, we begin to see their section of Varvelt surrounded by a purple heavy energy called Gift Ball Deluxe. It is the biggest poison ball Askin can make, and we see his Volstendig called Hashin. I love the design for his Volstendig. His appearance reminded me of a herald of the gods, mirroring the very godlike demeanor of the Quincy's once more. This moment felt like the fight I had awaited for all of the 1,000-Year Blood War. It has everything I want in a fight. But Urahara and Askin only last for 2 full chapters, without a proper backstory for Yoruichi and Urahara, and this is what I meant earlier about some of the pacing feeling a bit rushed. Kubo, with his limited time to finish the story, he couldn't flesh out the detail of every single fight, and with the last 20 chapters we can see that. It comes across to me that he thought he had more time, hence why the previous 2 fights lasted so long. But as he realized the time crunch he was on, he had to speed up a lot of the final fights, but regardless of them being sped up, this fight in particular is my favorite of this segment of the video. I imagine when the 1,000-Year Blood War is animated, this fight will be much longer and with much more detail added, and I frankly can't wait. Askin's Volstendig adapts to the alterations in poison, and Askin goes so far as to mark off a territory to make sure Urahara can't escape. I really enjoyed that Askin says that he hates using absolutes and big strong words, but that this area is inescapable. He once more breaks through the manga and comes across as aware that so many of the Quincy speak in absolutes, which Askin usually never does, so him saying it's inescapable feels all the more real. Kisuke responds saying he doesn't feel Askin is acting out of pure loyalty, and Askin agrees. He isn't following Yuha because he worships him, rather, he doesn't know when the next time someone like him would arise who seeks to destroy all 3 worlds and create something else. Askin goes so far as to ask Urahara why he personally doesn't want to see that. And Urahara, in a very fitting dialogue, says he doesn't think he'd want to. That maybe Kuretsuchi would, but if Kuretsuchi did, he'd want to see it done by his own hands, not by sitting on the sidelines and watching another man do it. That what it means to be a true scientist is to create something no one has ever seen by your own hands. And this answer is so good Askin doesn't even have a retort. He says he likes Urahara's answer. Here is the true difference in Askin and Urahara. Askin is content remaining idle and watching Yuha's plan come to life. He doesn't have any true ambitions for himself or conviction like the others. Urahara is starkly different, a scientist at heart, and it's so important that he points out in this dialogue that Mayuri wouldn't even share this curiosity and methodology from Askin. They are starkly different. Askin is not a scientist. Chit Chat ends pretty fast as we see Askin's gift ball ring hit Urahara and take out his eyes. This ability involves concentrating depth dealing into a single point and insta-killing the area, which is pretty overpowered if you ask me. But this evokes the most anticipated Bankai of the series within Urahara's, that being Kananburaki Benihime Aratame, and my god, it lived up to the hype. With the appearance of a giant marionette-like woman, she stands behind Urahara looking terrifying, and Askin's arm is quickly cut open as if he was opened during surgery. Urahara's Bankai's power is the ability to remake anything he comes in contact with, and we see the sick panel of Urahara's face stitched up with now working eyes. There is no better fitting of a Bankai than this. The most resourceful man in the series with the ability to remake literally anything, and we then see a clash of Askin and Urahara that was pretty short. Urahara literally reconstructs his own arm during this fight to give it more power, making him have a superhero-like punch, and I hope in the anime he does more attacks like this because the idea is incredible. As Askin increases the concentration of poison, Urahara informs him it's already too late, and we see a hand rip through Askin's chest with his heart in the hand. The freaking hand was Grimmjow's. I know all of us Grimmjow fans were jumping up and down with excitement. He was truly used in this final battle. During their clash, Urahara made a path from the outside, enabling Grimmjow to land the final blow on Askin. Urahara has one of the coldest panels in this arc, saying that if you make 1,000 preparations but only use one, then it was still worth it. Preparing for all possibilities without exception is how he does things. That this is war. If you lose, you die, so everybody prepares to death so they don't die. Urahara in these moments has never been more amazing and captivating, and he's the only man who contends with the #1 spot on my favorite characters within Rukia. Kisuke Urahara is the embodiment of methodical, and no matter what, he prepares for everything, and it's something that inspires me to not half-ass a thing, to prepare for every possible outcome and never get caught blindsided, to win. The true thing to fear about Urahara is this very concept. Askin with his final words breaks the story again by being meta, and he says that the fatal line he always does probably has gotten annoying, and the gift ball deluxe begins to increase its poison as now the threshold is eliminated with Askin's death. We see Nell from the outside appearing to head out to save them, which gives me hope for those trapped within, but Urahara's final words within this story, he says he leaves the rest to Ichigo in Rukia. It felt very much like a death scene, but a beautiful one at that. Urahara leaving things in the hand of Ichigo and Rukia, the two individuals who this story began with and who this story will end with. It is such a beautiful scene. And I can't get over how amazing this fight was, and I plan to one day in the future make an entire video about Askin and Urahara. After this fantastic fight, there is no slowing down from Kubo. We see someone talking to themselves with raunchy language, and I immediately knew who it was. Kenpachi Zaraki arrives back to the scene, and he joins the fray against Gerard the Miracle. My god, our Shinigami are gonna need all the help they can get. I loved this Gerard battle because it's one of the only battle of the Schutzstaffel we get to see multiple captains all working together, and we don't just see one, but two newly revealed Bankai. When this is animated, it's going to be crazy. Kenpachi and Gerard both have really similar personalities, and their clash was all the more fitting because of it. While fighting, we learn more of Gerard's incredible power, that if his blade is chipped, it does direct damage to his opponent, that his blade is made together by hope, and when broken, it becomes true despair. Gerard is the people's champ apparently. Kenpachi takes a ton of damage in the beginning of this fight as he wants to fight alone, so Byakuya and Toshiro have to plan around his antics. Toshiro and Byakuya have the most surprising chemistry, and with Byakuya being a character I thought didn't possess humor, his humor regarding Toshiro's height I genuinely chuckled at, and it led me to like Byakuya even more. With Kenpachi and Gerard going at it, Kenpachi gets hit really hard, and we see the surprise of the century. We see Yachiro asking Kenny what he's doing, saying that if he used her the right way, that there's nobody he couldn't cut down, and she shows him his Bankai. I lost my mind. Yachiro is like the little sister in Bleach, and seeing her return once more to aid Kenpachi in his battle, it felt so incredible as a reader, and seeing Kenpachi truly happy to see her, it warmed my heart. and I'm not sure whether this emotional scene or the hype of the Bankai overwhelmed my emotions more, but this was amazing. Kenpachi's pure spirit energy from his Bankai affected the entire Varvelt, and in Kenny's Bankai state, it mirrors the animalistic nature of him as a character. Rather than an ability, he instead is boosted in strength, speed, and power, much like Ichigo, which reminds me of the conversation of Kenpachi telling Ichigo long ago that they're just alike. They both seek battle and strength. With Kenpachi as an animalistic demon, his sense of reason and speech was minimalized greatly, and he truly seemed terrifying even to his allies. Despite Kenpachi killing Gerard in this battle, Gerard comes back even more powerful and he looks a ton like Thor, which I'm sure he's modeled after. It's pretty wild to think about how Gerard is literally unkillable, which is something I think Kubo regretted a bit later in the story. With Kenpachi's power now overwhelming, while swinging his blade, his arm splits up, and we see Yachiro saying she released too much of Kenny's power. This touches back to when Grimmy lost his battle because he tried to use strength like Kenpachi, which his body couldn't support. Kenpachi's power exceeds his own body's limitations. What a badass. With all hope seeming lost, we witness Toshiro's true Bankai that turns him much older, and he looks incredibly handsome. I saw this form in the trailer and I had long awaited seeing it myself, and it didn't disappoint. The completion of Daigen Horimaru turns him into an Ice King, and he's able to freeze Gerard even in his godlike state. But to fully take down Gerard momentarily, an emphasis on momentarily because he survives, it required the combination of Kenpachi, Byakuya, and Toshiro, 3 Bankai simultaneously, and this unexpected teamwork was brilliant. I loved reading this fight, and the action during it is something that will shine when animated. We're then taken to the final fights of this arc. Ichigo approaches the throne of Yuha with his old Shikai, and he slices down Yuha only for Yuha to wake up, saying that this was a wonderful dream, that nightmarish ones are always the most enjoyable. I was immediately thrown off by seeing Ichigo with his Shikai, but this masterful foreshadowing from Kubo pays dividends later on. Ichigo in real time, however, approaches the throne room of Yuha, and before they enter the room, Ichigo asks Orihime to protect him. Throughout all the times Orihime had been in the shadows being protected, she is now in a position to protect the man she cares for. The culmination of the growth for both characters felt so paramount. Ichigo opens the door, and he's surrounded by his own spirit energy, and upon provocation from Yuha, we see the long-awaited return of 2 words, Getsuga Tensho. This battle was drawn incredibly beautiful. The clash of Getsuga against Yuha's darkness felt like a clash of both good and evil. Yuha's desire to consume Ichigo as a form of nourishment, and his emphasis on the fact he created Ichigo, felt like Yuha was truly fitting the narrative of a god to a T. Ichigo, despite this vast increase in strength, he can't defeat a god on his own, and Ichigo is on the losing side of this battle despite his efforts to continue fighting. There's a dialogue with Byakuya, Rukia, and Renji, and Byakuya tells both of them to go help Ichigo. Ichigo needs them. That at the end of the day, himself and Toshiro are Ichigo's allies, but who he needs are his friends. We also see Uryu and Hashworth, which occurred mostly off-screen, with Uryu taking immense damage. I felt Uryu and Hashworth got the short end of the stick, because despite all the hype for Hashworth, he doesn't get much time in the end of the story compared to the other Schutzstaffel, but he does hint at some important information for us, that the terrifying power of the Almighty is not that it can see the future, and it had me rattling my brain from possible further powers of this ability which already seems broken. A giant surprise happens during this time away from Ichigo's battle as well, and Isshin and Ryukin arrive to Varvelt. Kubo, with this anticipation, he switches back between events and it emphasizes the fights happening simultaneously, and we're taken finally back to Ichigo's fight. That despite Ichigo seeming to be losing the entire time, it was part of his plan as his blade was drenched in Quincy Rietsu, and his new power we had long awaited for finally comes on full display. This is by far my favorite form of Ichigo appearance-wise, and I love the black lines through his face mirroring his hollow side, and with this form it truly feels like the culmination of all his powers into one form. With Orihime seeing a power she once feared with Ichigo toting the horn he had when fighting Ulquiorra, once seeing Ichigo's face, he was still himself. This moment is so paramount. Ichigo now has full control of himself, full acceptance of all the parts of who he is. Chapter 676 was by far my favorite chapter of this fight versus Yuha. Ichigo in his new form with his new power was overwhelmingly awesome, and I geeked out so hard watching him combine a Sero with his Getsuga Tensho. It truly felt like everything we've seen from Ichigo's character put together, and I've never been more proud to be a Bleach fan. With Ichigo's form, I thought he would have been able to defeat Yuha due to his hollow side being a direct counter, but as the fight progresses, Yuha shows the monster he truly is, and he gives a chilling speech regarding the future spread out like countless grains of sand, with endless possibilities, and that he can see each and every one of them, and he speaks of despair. Wrong choice of words, Yuha, because Ichigo has dealt with despair since his childhood, and he's conquered it every time. We then see the famous words of and for a moment, we see Tensa's Zangetsu, but literally the next panel it's cut in half. This was one of the few complaints I had this arc. We never really get to see his Bankai in true action. Yuha glimpsed into the future and snapped his Bankai in the future, making it broken now. Yuha's abilities, in my opinion, are far too powerful, and it makes defeating him relatively impossible. The power of the Almighty is not to merely see the future, but to alter it. Unreal. Ichigo is defeated brutally and his Quincy and Hollow powers are drained from him by Yuha. This moment was truly full of despair for Ichigo. As I've said before, I hate when characters lose their power, and this is no exception. As Ichigo's powers fade, Ichigo sees everything turn white, and this symbolism is crazy. With his Quincy side drained, all he has left is white. White being his Hollow and Shinigami side. We're briefly brought to Uryu and Hashwoth, and we see Uryu's shrift in action while he's on the brink of death. The antithesis allows him to choose between 2 points, take the events that occurred between them, and reverse them entirely. And Hashwoth conveniently has a power that is relatively similar, and he can share a misfortune that befalls him to his shield, and tip the scales by taking the good fortune Uryu achieved by wounding him, and returning an equal amount of misfortune. This fight and their powers truly felt like they could have endlessly reverse Uno carded each other, and despite Uryu having a powerful shrift, it really isn't used in the future whatsoever. Uryu is then defeated, but before he's killed, another Ashwulen takes place, and Gerard is taken out of the story due to Yuha, thank God, and Hashwoth goes to death's door. Hashwoth in his final moments tells him to transfer Uryu's wounds to him, and told him to follow what he wants to do. Otherwise he'd regret it forever, and Hashwoth in this moment felt like a neutral evil. He gives Uryu the chance to go help his friends, something he was never able to do for himself or for Boz. We're then taken back to Yuha bidding farewell to Ichigo, saying to watch as he crushes all the worlds. With Rukia and Renji arriving, they too receive a farewell from Yuha as he opens a portal and leaves. Ichigo now surrounded by his friends, he's helpless and mentally defeated. Yet Renji picks him up to carry Ichigo to continue fighting. I don't shed a lot of tears, but I had tears at this moment. Regardless of their fate seeming hopeless, Ichigo's friends who have been there time and time again, they stand by his side to fight against a god. Ichigo is never alone. They remind him of who he is, that he can't stop moving forward, that even if he does, they'll be there to help him. Even Tsukishima arrives, and he and the Fullbringers restore his blade, and this was the only way for Yuha's hacks to be countered. This is truly the culmination of every character and event throughout this story, and it's beautiful. As Ichigo and Renji set out for the final battle, that he vowed when Ichigo would be unable to go on, he'd take Ichigo forever forward. That his debt to Ichigo for returning Rukia to his life is something he'll never forget. In this moment, Uryu is encountered by Ryukin and Isshin, and they grant him an arrow formed by all the small clots of silver by those taken from Ashwulen. This arrow will change everything in this story. As our heroes now trudge on to fight one last time, Yuha arrives to Soul Society, or should I say, Aizen's Soul Society, and I have long awaited this moment. Their initial clash is so strong that it breaks even the chair Aizen sat upon, and an important dialogue for Aizen's character transpires. Yuha questions why he would fight for the sake of Soul Society, but Aizen says he isn't fighting for Soul Society, his only purpose has always been to crush all those who seek to control him. I had chills hearing this. The Soul King, and now Yuha. Anyone who's ever wanted to control Aizen has fought ruthlessly against for his own version of freedom. At the same time the arrival of Ichigo takes place, and we see Ichigo's sword was now cracked and not broken like Yuha thought. This is the first time we've seen the Almighty have any true error. There's then some fighting and losing of arms, shout out Kubo once more, and on first read it was hard to understand what was fully going on until I realized it was Aizen Suigetsu, and once again he duped us and myself, and my gosh, Aizen with an arm lost, he now has a hole in his chest. This moment allowed Ichigo to get an opening and surprise Yuha using a Getsugo Tensho through his body. I never thought Aizen could be a team player, but seeing him set up for this attack for Ichigo felt so incredible as a fan of this story. I truly thought this was the end for Yuha, but due to his ability he overwrites the future and admits he would have been dead from that attack, but he is restored full of darkness and now seeming to be overcome with delusions of deism. Uryu with the best timing in history arrives, and he fires the arrow that halts the very power of Yuha for an instant, and Ichigo swings with his partially broken blade. Remember what he said earlier? It all turns to white. In the final swing, we see the sword finally crack through that outward appearance, and it reveals his original Shikai. The Shikai most directly connected to his true Shinigami side, that being white. Symbolically, this was phenomenal. Ichigo defeats Yuha with his power as a true Shinigami. The breaking through of the blade felt surreal to see the Shikai that started it all. It was something I thought we'd never see again. Yuha was defeated with the power he didn't bestow to Ichigo, and he's also defeated through his own actions within the arrow created by the Ashwulen. I'm glad in this final battle, despite it being short, Ichigo and Uryu worked together once more. With this, Yuha is defeated, and this fight was amazing. However, I wish there were a few more things fleshed out more fully, with more detail of the arrow and how Ryukin came to understand that this arrow would even work. Yuha's motivation, which didn't seem that significant, is actually fleshed out in the final chapter with the monologue with Aizen that we'll get to in a second. I also wanted to see Ichigo with his Bankai in new form much longer in the story, because after so much anticipation for his return, I felt he should have been able to use it longer. After all, in the Thousand Year Blood War, Ichigo doesn't have many fights, but I understand him having it taken away in the face of such power as Yuha. I personally love the Shikai moment, and it really made the story feel like it came full circle. The following and final 2 chapters, they show the aftermath of the battle, and with 10 years having passed. It's a feel-good ending. We see Namuri number 8, super cute. Along with that, we see a captain ceremony inducting Rukia as the new captain of the 13th Division. As a number 1 Rukia fan, this moment made me smile ear to ear. Another moment that felt amazing was seeing Rukia and Renji arrive to the clinic, and we see everyone all grown up. It brought a tear to my eye to see how, despite everyone changing in terms of appearance, they were all still the same group we fell in love with. Ichigo and Orihime now married with the family, along with Rukia and Renji also having a child. This was beautiful. Hell, Chad is even a boxer now, and Uryu did turn out to be a doctor. The meeting of Kazui Kurosaki and Ichika Abari was super cute too, and seeing our heroes who fought for so long now being able to have families and live a normal life truly brought joy to my day. It's also super cute that Ichika's name is so close to Ichigo, and I'm sure that's what she was named after. The man to close out our story within a monologue is Aizen. I figured him or Kisuke would close us out, and Aizen addresses Yuha's desire to destroy all the 3 worlds and bring life and death together as one. That it would create a world without fear, the fear of death. But Aizen says in a world without fear, men couldn't seek out hope. That they could walk, but walking without conquering fear is much different. That walking forth in the face of fear is what we call courage. The very hope and courage Aizen speaks of, it is the direct opposite to despair which Yuha embodies. Our heroes exist with hope, and as all of us do, we walk forth every day in face of our fears and continue moving forward. The story in a fitting ending is with the characters it began with, Rukia and Ichigo. And hell, Aizen even put it all into motion, so it begins and ends with him too. The story of Ichigo Kurosaki doesn't follow the typical narrative of a shonen protagonist. This story isn't Ichigo seeking a throne, conquering others, or becoming the best. This story is of an individual facing his own darkness and overcoming it. This is the story of Ichigo conquering himself, and that is the greatest feat of all. This has been my blind review of Bleach, and this story is one that I will hold on to forever. If you've joined me along for all of these videos, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support. I promise the Bleach content won't end despite us finishing the manga. There's still so much this beautiful story entails. Guys, we really did it. We finished Bleach. It feels surreal saying out loud that we truly finished this series, but my god, this has been the ride of a lifetime. Similarly to what Rukia told Ichigo, this isn't goodbye, but see you later. As always, my friends, be greedier.